everyone. Thanks so much for coming to our meeting. I'm Rebecca. We're going to go ahead and get started so we stay on schedule. I appreciate you all coming out today. As you know, we are here for a presentation from the North Lawndale Restorative Justice Community Court. And we've been trying to put this presentation together for a while because I know a lot of us are really excited to hear more about the court and how they work and what they do. So we're so pleased to have with us Tomas Ramirez and Stephanie Chupka from the court today to tell us a little bit more about how they work and what they do, about their 4 pillars, and to let us know how we can support the court and how we can refer people there. And we're so glad to have you with us today. So thanks for coming. Please don't forget to sign in for CLE before we start. And does anybody have any announcements before we get started? Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I want to personally acknowledge the great work that our city has been doing in implementing and developing restorative processes. If some of you are of the same age group of me, which means we are very wise people in our mid-40s, and you will remember that in 2006, Chicago Public Schools adopted restorative justice as part of the Student Code of Conduct. Out of that process, a lot of different organizations and institutions followed suit and started doing the same thing, such as the Evanston Police Department, one of the oldest programs that incorporates this process has been working there since, actually I think it's 2005. Today we're here to talk a little bit about the Restorative Justice Community Court. Both of us are here representing the North Lawndale Christian Legal Center. I'll let Stephanie introduce herself and say more towards the unique model, which I think is very important when it comes to attorneys being aware of the restorative process, not only for the specific court in which we work, but in general. Restorative processes are in fashion, and they're a way to humanize people who are going through different systems. But at the same time, restorative justice is all about social capital. It's about relationships. First of all, being in right relationship with ourselves, easy thing, you know? We really like ourselves a lot, every day. Then to be in right relationship with others, institutions, and our environment. As you see, it's a much larger context than just addressing harm in non-punitive ways. The reality is that when we achieve a process of that will restore the humanity in a human being or in a community, we're actually doing part which is sustainable development. And oftentimes we don't really talk about that. I'll give a couple of details about the court, then I'm gonna let Stephanie talk about it because I have a tendency to hug the mic because I pretend to be an educator. That's why I like to lecture. So the Restorative Justice Community Court is aimed to work with young or adults or emerging adults, 18 to 26 years old, that originally had not committed a non-violent crime. They will go through a process of screening. Out of that, we will do an assessment we will know as a pre-circle process, which is very similar to any kind of assessment that different agencies do. And that's how that when they'll request to be admitted into the court. At this point, they might have either representation from the public defender or a private attorney. Then we do engage in the foundation of the work, which is the Restorative Justice Circle, or Talking Circle, Healing Circle, Peace Circle, as people will call them. And that is where we're able to uncover a lot of the things that are manifested in the behavior that led that young person to be arrested. That's a process that could take from 4 months to almost a full year. Once we get to a healthy space with that, we develop what is called the repair of harm agreement, the ROHA. And in the ROHA, we will have about 4 to 5 specific points that may not make a lot of sense, but if you're just thinking about whatever was the reason this young person got arrested, but ultimately our aim to address all the different needs that led to that behavior to be manifested. I'll give you an example of some of the points in some repair of harm agreements. We had one when the person that caused harm actually had to support the person whose car he had temporarily borrowed, and this is an elderly lady. He had no idea. So part of this process that he had to actually take her on an outing to develop a relationship with her. Of course, this was there was an earlier process where they got to introduce each other, acknowledge each other, but from taking this grandma's car to going shopping, I mean, going to the market and also going out. So that's an example. Have another case where this young person needed to connect with a group of men. So, as you know, there's a very famous program right now in the city, BAM, Becoming a Man, and we got him to develop a relationship with a whole bunch of counselors and to attend different circles with them. We have been able to look into something such as getting a job, shadow somebody that's a business owner. So these are things that ultimately develop the person in an emotional way. I mean, this is a political development. They have agency. At the same time that they start connecting with community. Once we achieve this repair of harm agreement, then the court will accept it, and we will transfer that person to work with a case manager. And of course, at this time, the attorney is accompanying them in this process. Then, once the person fulfills all of the requirements of the ROHA with the support of the case manager, that's when the state attorney and the judge, based on the proper completion of this repair of harm agreement, will dismiss the case. I'm sorry. So, like I say, have a tendency to monopolize the dialogue. So I'll pass it to you.
Sure. Thanks so much. So I'm Stephanie Chupka. I'm an attorney at the Lawndale Christian Legal Center. I'm an Equal Justice Works fellow / staff attorney, I guess. I've been there about 2 years, and I'd like to touch a little bit on kind of broadly what LCLC does, because the Restorative Justice Community Court is really just one part of our practice. So we represent young people under the age of 24 in juvenile and adult court. We take felonies or misdemeanors. Our practice is pretty varied, but generally it's young people who live in North Lawndale in adult and juvenile, generally charged with felonies. And so we take a holistic defense approach to each and every client, whether they're in the Restorative Justice Community Court or not. Regardless of what court they're in, they're working with not only an attorney, but also a case manager who's supporting them with similar things that the court might support them with. Help finding a job, help staying in school, registering for school, just having a supportive person in their life to kind of guide them towards, setting goals and then achieving those goals. Any of the social things that attorneys don't typically focus on, that's what the case manager is doing. And I think the model works really well because we're then able to use the social support they're getting to sometimes also get better legal outcomes. Whether that's putting together really stellar mitigation packets, drawing on all of the social support that they're getting through our case management services, and then also connections to other agencies in the area as well. The case manager is able to make referrals, and they sort of know the landscape of social services that are available. So that comes up with mitigation packets, with bond motions, things like that, where we really try to bring the, bring to the court's attention or the state's attorney's attention that this is a whole person. They're not just the worst moment of their life where they were arrested, So that's sort of what we do more generally. In the restorative justice community court, as Tomas explained, it's a great opportunity for our clients to go through this restorative justice process and get connected to the community and to other. Is my mic not on?
It's just hard to hear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt.
Is that better?
They might have to talk directly into it. I'm sorry.
Am I not as loud as Tomas? Can you hear me in back now? Better? Okay. Sorry about that. The RJCC Restorative Justice Community Court is this great opportunity for clients to have a felony case dismissed, as well as access all of these supportive services. In that space, as a lawyer, my role is much smaller than it would be in a traditional courtroom setting. I go over with my clients, what would be required of them, make sure they understand what's going on and what they'll be required to do before they decide to participate in this. But really, most of the work of the court is being done by Tomas and the other circle keepers who are meeting outside of court to do these circles. The state's attorney and the defense attorneys in that space we're not in the circle process at all. It's kind of to keep it confidential. They come back to court with the repair of harm agreement. And that's the only thing that goes into the court file.
Go ahead. No, I just don't want to minimize the role of the attorney in this process because at the same time, the attorney understands the different things that could really work against the participant. So it is really important to, once we're presenting a repair of harm agreement, as we're presenting it before it gets accepted into the court, that not only do you have an attorney that fully understands the different issues that are going on in the community, but also understands where their participant is at the social emotional level.
So with that, I feel like we are open to any questions you all have. We could kind of go on about various things, but I'm curious to hear what people are interested in hearing.
Yes. I'm sorry if I missed this, but did cases get directly referred to you by the court, or how do they come to you?
So for Lawndale Christian Legal Center, generally, we get cases in a variety of ways. Some of the public defenders will refer cases to us if they know that, because we only serve people in North Lawndale, but geographically they might see that and send them our way. We have community members call in. People refer their friends that way. For the Restorative Justice Community Court, those cases are generally screened in by the state's attorney's office pretty early on in the case. We've occasionally advocated for specific cases to go to the RJCC, but the bulk of the cases that are there are coming there through the state's attorney's office.
And pretty much you will have to be living within the boundaries of North Lawndale to be referred to the court. There was somebody, yes.
My question was about the process as well, but in terms of the circles, is the victim of the crime, is that a necessary part to be in the program? And if so, how is it that you go about approaching people to be involved in what's the success rate of having people who want to be part of it?
Beautiful question. We really advocate to have the person who received harm to be part of the process. That brings different difficulties based on what kind of crime was committed. Because when we have a drug case, it might be hard to have someone, although from a restorative perspective of our community accountability process, you could argue that the whole community is affected. In that case, we try to get a surrogate or a community representative to stand for the community and represent the interests of the community and address the person that caused the harm from that perspective. We also do a lot of work that will support the person who received harm to be able to be there. A lot of times, even if you have somebody that really advocates for an alternative process that does not want to be punitive towards the young person, the moment that they realize that as you participate in the circle process, you have to, does not operate based on hierarchy. And if I am sharing some of my emotional difficulties in the moment and the person that caused harm is doing that, the person that received it has to do the same, that's when all of a sudden they're like, I'm okay, I'm not as sure about this, but go ahead, but I'm just going to step back. In other cases, like the one that I said earlier, I mean, that grandma was part of the whole process, and it was beautiful. It's harder the moment that you realize that everybody who participates has to put some skin in the game. We also have look for different programs and organizations that do some work. Just last Monday, I connected with a group of mothers whose kids had been had harmed others and then serving life sentences to address one of the young men in that I'm working with, because that's the best surrogate that I can find as for him to really get the emotional impact that somebody going to prison has on the family as well. Yes, sir.
Could you describe a typical peace circle process? Is it like one meeting, two meetings?
Okay.
Or, I don't really have a sense of how.
Thank you.
What a peace circle.
Awesome, thank you. Let me ask a question first. Who has participated in a circle process before here? Raise your hand. 1, 2, okay. That's 3 or 4 people. That's awesome, thank you. So, in the talking circle, we will have about 5 to 6 people at times, more. It depends. We're looking for people that have connections to this participant. I have been able to find grandmothers, uncles, neighbors, high school counselors, which it might require doing a lot of research, because at times when we do get the young person, they really claim to not have any connections, or even the connections that they thought that they have, the moment that they got arrested, they disappear, and I point that out, hey, where are your homies right now, So that itself could take some cooking time. The moment that we get there, so the circle process will usually last about 3 hours, each one of them, and we're focused on really unscrambling the emotional shape of the person and some of their emotional harms or their emotional gaps. So this process could take three circles on average of 3 circles when they're very willing to do the work, which is really hard, and 3 circles is usually not the norm. A lot of times they will last 5 circles. We have had up to 8 circles with some participants, and you also have to realize that nobody just tells you, here are my issues, I equal it to the dating life, when you meet someone, you don't tell them, hey, I have mommy issues, I'm struggling with this, I have bad breath in the morning. So it takes a while to get to that place of vulnerability for them. And there are also the different issues around the community. If this person was selling drugs, there might be an economic need, or they might be part of a gang. So there are different complexities that could make use the circle process take 6 months, 4 months. It just varies. And at times you could have somebody that's doing really well, something happens and emotionally they shut down. So you basically have to start all over. And that's why we also have to be very upfront that it's a very slow cooking process. And we have a lot of participants who they just want to take care of business. They're like, hey, I want to go through to this process just like what happens in California in 26, and they process me right away, and then I just face whatever I need to face. So for them to, and we have people that are literally, the moment that they start doing some work, they're like, hey, send me back, If I can do the time, I can do the crime. I mean, we're working against that narrative, and it's not for everybody because they have to really invest themselves.
It is. I just want to add, it sounds like it's a lot of work, I think, to go through this court. Not everyone realizes it, and there is, whether the participants themselves may voluntarily say, I don't want to do this, which is fine. I generally would advise them to at least try it, right? Because that's their opportunity to have a felony case dismissed. It doesn't go on their record at all as a conviction at any point. But then there's also, if they're not following through or adequately participating in the process after some time, their case can also get sent back that way too, which has happened, but not very often.
Can you tell us a little bit about how many cases you get and what types of cases they tend to be?
So I don't know how many the courts. I right now have 4. I've probably had up to 10 total, but the court is...
We just dismissed 19 cases, so we have 61 active cases. Out of that, I have 21, so a whole bunch. Any support? You want to sit in circle? Let me know. So that's where we are right now. And the court was designed to address about from 60 to 100 cases each year.
And can you tell us what types of cases they are, what are the most common issues?
So it's a requirement to get into the court that it be a non-violent felony. So it seems that drug cases are very common. We also have Tomas mentioned a case involving a car. Possession of a stolen motor vehicle is allowed into the court. Those are the only ones I've had.
And that was part of the original funding from the Center for Court Innovation. That was one of the requirements for the first year of operation of the court. That is no longer a requirement. If anything, those of us who have been working in the field were expecting to have different cases in order to actually prove that the process works with violent crime as well, which is honestly how it had been implemented in courts earlier, mostly in Canada and in New Zealand, when there are community courts that have years ahead of us.
And my understanding is that the state's attorney is reaching out to the complaining witness in all of these cases, and so it's not that. I think one of the reasons that people generally might shy away from a violent offense coming into this court is they think like, oh, the complaining witness would never agree to that. But the point or part of this court is that they are being asked to participate or at least consent to the person going through the process.
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question about training. It feels like there's some parallels potentially to mediation as we look at some sort of similarities. But you don't become like a certificate in restorative justice. How do you become a circle keeper? Is it just through a certain amount of practice and then you feel comfortable and you lead it, or is there a formal set of training?
There is a training at Precious Blood that's a 4-day training that I've gone through and that most people at Lawndale Christian Legal Center have done, but I don't know that that's enough for me. I would not feel comfortable leading a circle.
Yeah, so there are multiple agencies that provide initial education. There are also some universities that are doing that as part of some of their programs. For example, I teach at the Pulse Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program. So all of our students in that program get the education. And yet, as Stephanie stated, one thing is to get the initial education. Some people do 3-4 days. Some people do two days. I do a 10-week course. And yet, you become skilled out of practicing. Ideally, what we have in the city is we have seasoned practitioners who not only can do training, but that can do mentoring. And the idea is that the more that you practice, that you also start working in different scenarios. We have a lot of people, for example, that have been doing a lot of work in CPS that are not necessarily going to be able to do some of work that a lot of people do with gangs, because it's just some things overlap, but the realities are very different. So that just comes from experience. We do offer some of this training at LCLC, and I'm more than happy to connect you with our agency or with some of the other groups that provide that training in the city.
Can you talk a little bit about, I'm sure you track data on recidivism within your program and how that compares to data of the general population committing similar crimes?
Well, so the court has only existed for, is it 2 years yet?
Not yet.
Not even 2 years yet. So I think the data is being collected, but I think it's too soon to make that comparison.
Yes. The other thing is that there's that part, but ultimately, is what is also making it really hard is that each case varies a lot. So that when you would love to have all your data collected, but for example, just this morning I was working with a participant that was accepted into the court August of last year, and we have not even completed the circle process. Different things. So that's one of the things that also is really affecting us. I think that by the time that we have 2 years existing, we will be able to get something together. Literally, we just have had 19 graduates in almost 2 years. I mean, not even 2 years of the court existing, because a lot of the other cases are still ongoing.
I was wondering if maybe you could walk us through an example. I know you mentioned that a lot of the cases are drug related, but I think some of us who are new to this are sort of unclear what it might look like. Like, what would a peace circle look like? What would a circle, I don't know if it's right here, but what would a circle look like for a drug related offense, and what might be an example of an outcome?
Cool. You want to start, or you want to do it?
Sure. Well, you're the circle expert, so.
All right, let's give him a name. First name Huey, last name Newton. Huey gets got arrested in his school in the boundaries of North Lawndale because he was selling controlled substances, and he was pointed out by his girlfriend because they had issues.
Gotta give it some drama.
So he gets arrested. He gets referred to. He gets screened and sent to the court. If he has a private attorney, the attorney will meet with him and sign the proper documents for him to be admitted into the court.
Maybe I should explain
Yes.
a little bit what that looks like.
Yes.
Participants in the court are not pleading guilty, but they have to sign something like acknowledging that they understand the circle process and that it means that they're like accepting responsibility for their actions. So it's not a formal guilty plea, but they do sort of have to acknowledge, like, okay, I did something wrong and I'm willing to put in the work to go through this process. So there is like a little contract that they sign at the beginning, and so I would go over that with Huey, and if he has any questions, probably refer him to Tomas about the process. And
And at times the public defender will do that if he doesn't have a private attorney. At that point, which is still tricky because even in regular court, you have a lot of people show up and like, hey, I'm like, you're there, and because of the way that the hierarchy within the court and also the social emotional development or lack of it of the person when they're saying, hey, you understand the charges against you, etc., and they were like, which they don't. You have some participants who have previous arrests, they might have been in court before, and they're actually a little more aware. Like, hey, I have the right to expedite trial, etc. They will be able to argue, hey, hold on. If I do this, how long is it going to take? Because I want to take care of my business like this, or I just want to get an attorney, etc. So once they get accepted into the court, I will meet with Huey and do basically an assessment, very similar to what the JASI is. I mean, that's one of the most common ones, that's what I put it, the youth assessment instrument that different agencies have used. At the same time, they get an assessment from social services from the county, because we also have to unscramble things. That's when we start doing the detective work, because just because Huey had a bunch of ecstasy or Xanax, whatever, or cannabis on him, that doesn't mean that he has a drug problem, or even that when there might be some use, that means that there's an addiction. The complexity of the young people's lives varies. Literally, we have had not Huey, but we had a participant that literally lived in one of the craziest, busiest corners of the neighborhood, and he had experienced a lot of trauma through life. So in order to be able to go to sleep, he will smoke. He will smoke cannabis, and he was really open around this in the assessment. That doesn't mean that he does need to go get 40 hours of drug education. He needs something to address his PTSD. So that's some of the work that we start unscrambling, or actually creating a map as we are about to enter the circle process. So then we have a date for the circle process. We always co-facilitated, so we have a lead facilitator and a co-facilitator. And then we have to ask Huey, who would he like to have in the circle? It could be indeed his friends, his homies that he has deep connections with. Most of the time they're not. And a lot of times young people who have had an active street life are there because all of the different relationships that were important to them have failed them in one way or another, or they're ruptured. They're not in a healthy state. So then we have to dig in deeper. That's what I was telling you earlier, like go look for high school counselors. In the case of Huey, I was able to get a BAM counselor, a high school counselor, and then we also got volunteers from the community, which also this project has required for us to develop more people in the community to be aware of the process, because you don't want to have a volunteer that is in the circle and all of a sudden starts just, lecturing the participant. So we have everybody that is going to participate in the circle, and then we that's when we start light, like introductions and explain the protocols for the circle. One person speaks at a time. You speak your truth. Everything that happens, I guess, addressed within the circle is confidential. So we have an agreement of confidentiality. Even the judge does not get to know exactly what happens in the circle. All that the judge gets is the repair of harm agreement, with the different objectives for this person. And that, of course, helps them to open up. That's an issue that has been brought up in the past at the state level, because there might be or the perception could be that your participant could really disclose some things that had to do with other cases. Now, we usually not stay there, because when we're addressing why Huey was selling ecstasy, we're really trying to see what are the relationships that or the connections that he has he had that are no longer working. So we kind of go away from his street life and his affiliations, and we start looking about what's really going on with him. In the case of Huey, younger brother has leukemia. He doesn't really know that, and he is trying to help mom to pay bills. Of course, he had a bunch of other stuff. He's into tagging, and we literally went away from anything else that could get him into further legal issues by disclosing anything. We don't need to know about his gang affiliation. I mean, he disclosed that. We don't need to know more about some of the other stuff that he has done. We're just focusing on the things that are going to benefit him. And that itself is hard. Like, say, how many of us, like the example of the dating life, how many of us, like, hey, I still have mommy issues, I still have that issues, I don't like my siblings, you know. It's in that sense, like, what are the things that have caused you pain, the things that you're hurt, and next thing you know, like, say, things like Huey's little brother having leukemia come up, and him acknowledging, hey, that's why I have this need to, like, make money to contribute to that, but at the same time, it gets me in a bad place. It hurts. I pop a few pills because I struggle, you know, to face those realities sober, and that requires a lot of courage to be able to do it. So we go through that, and that could just be one circle, and it could be very emotionally exhausting for everybody. So then we might do a session, which is where we just check in. There's another restorative process, which is these conferences, and we start then mapping some things that could contribute for him to get better, and then we bring those to the next circle, and that's when we start looking at different things that could help build Huey's life, going back to school, getting work. In Huey's case, he was also applying to college, connecting with family at a deeper level, like writing a letter to that, acknowledging the pain that he is experiencing with his mom and his sibling. And out of that, we start developing those objectives. That will be a second circle. Third circle will address what are the obstacles to achieve some of these goals, check the emotional state of everybody in the circle, and at this point we'll also start to communicate a lot with the case manager and hopefully engage with the case manager. I'll report some things to the attorney. Hey, we're in this stage. We're almost to the point that we're going to achieve the Roja. Or at times it has happened that our participants catch another case, so that could be detrimental. So just being in communication with them, hey, this might come and affect us in this way, especially since we're already close to achieve a repair of harm agreement. The moment that we have the Roja, everybody has to agree and give recommendations, but then the participant has to be fully aware that is to him, her, theirs, to fulfill these goals, and that's the part that is really hard. You know, hey, I'm used to do my 6 months. You know, I can do that with no problem. I'll sleep. I'll stay out of trouble when I'm there. then I'm done with it, or I just have to comply with whatever my probation officer tells me. Here, you have to be active. You have to have agency, because it's about really reconnecting with those relationships that gave you meaning, but also taking accountability for your own life. You're the one that applies for this job. You're the one that saves this money to get your own apartment, and that is not part of the narrative, and that's where our participants struggle a lot. After you do that, I'll go to you. We sign it. Everybody's in agreement. That's when we'll present this to the judge, and that's when Huey states that those are his goals, and he's in agreement. The judge and the state attorneys accept it, and then at that point they're done with me, with the circle process. That doesn't mean that we drop the ball, because we have developed relationships with them, but it's up to the case manager to be in communication at this point with a lot more with the attorney, and I support that communication and that relationship to be able to complete those. Okay, so you need to go back to school. We make sure that happens. So every time that Huey goes back to court, has to report in what goals have been met. The moment that he's complete with that, a specific follow-up plan will be developed, and the state attorneys and the judge just agree with that, then just the case gets dismissed. Sorry.
So the case manager, who is this person? Are they through the court, or are they through some social service agency? And then coupled with that, a lot of the goals that you mentioned are goals that probably really take some resources, whether it's counseling or drug treatment or whatever it may be. Are those resources readily available? Like, who's providing the funding for this operation?
So the case managers come from different agencies that in North Lawndale. We have, as part in the city, we have the restorative justice hubs, who are the agencies that are leading the restorative work in the city, and that able to provide multiple services that are restorative in essence. In North Lawndale, we have the largest hub in the city. We have close to 20 agencies, and these agencies provide some of the services, not only the case management. For example, we need somebody to do some community engagement -- community service, but we just don't want to have the cleanest toilet bowls in North Lawndale. We want to send this young person to do these hours where he's going to engage with someone. Okay, who do I have that is able to do this? That is part of our network, and send them there. So that ends happening a lot. There are some things that, of course, we struggle with when it comes to funding, and also finding some resources. There used to be an agency that provide drug screening, assessment, and counseling in North Lawndale. It closed, so we're like, ouchie. So LCLC was able to provide a counselor. We had to contract with someone, but that does not meet all of the needs for all our participants, which is the other issue. There are some things that you can anticipate or have a small amount of resources to address that, but then it becomes a larger issue. So housing is something that is very hard for us right now, that we were not anticipating. We have in the city of Chicago, and this is an outdated statistic, this is from about 8 years ago, you have on a given day about 10,000 youth who are homeless or in transitional living situations. Now, so we have different agencies in the city. Currently we don't have one that can support us directly in North Lawndale. So we had to go to teen living, Catholic Charities, the night ministry, Heartland, and yet then brings other issues because we have participants that cannot go to all of the areas in the city because of gang affiliations. There are specific needs for LGBTQ community. There are not a lot of specific places. And on top of that, even if you're able to maneuver through that, it's been about 3 years that for the different agencies has been really hard to provide services for young adults, and that has to do with how they were being requested by the city of Chicago to do screening in order to provide services. So the struggles that we're having are working with this court also have they intersect with other struggles in the city, and that's when like I said, since the restorative justice has as its objective to be in right relationship with self, other institutions, and environment, you realize that the environment and the institutions are coming short there, and that's, of course, it manifests in the young people in North Lawndale, but it's a much larger problem. So we encounter some of those, and some of those we are able to be as creative as we can, and others we struggle with each new participant that has that need.
And I think what you said about this being a bigger problem is really important. The problems that Tomas just described are not specific to the RJCC. These are problems that are like LCLC's case managers work with all of our clients, regardless of which court they're in, and are dealing with these same issues.
Are you able to assist clients that have committed crimes that are related to or as a result of their mental health issues or that have teenagers? And do you work with various institutions or facilities within your communities to get an idea about that kind of scope?
I think that's common with a lot of our clients, even if it's, maybe you remember, there was a study done about PTSD and related issues experienced in communities like North Lawndale, and the rates of our clients affected by PTSD and associated mental health issues is very high. And sometimes that might be an underlying cause for why this person has committed a drug-related offense if they're self-medicating or although it's also an economic issue.
Yeah. I'll say start playing B.B. King because I'm about to go into the blues right now. And that's one of the biggest and harshest realities that we have. And I would say that about 40% of people who are going through the system have some sort of mental health issue. At times I'm being very conservative in that. But then you have some severe cases that certainly are way above that with what the hub or the court or any agency in North Lawndale can provide, and where you have no family support. There are some very obvious mental health issues. They might fall into the spectrum of autism. I mean, you name it. And we just don't have the proper resources. But this manifests into a young black man who is 17 years old, is tall, but like say there might be some autism. So when you are soft, he's able to process things, but all of a sudden somebody telling him to move, like suddenly triggers him, and all that you get to see is an angry black man that is not listening to commands. When the reality is that there are some things that we're not. He doesn't walk with his assessment, and that intersects with stereotype threat and some of the realities in communities that have been marginalized. And it's one of the toughest realities. What we try to do in those cases is to request that they show up to court like every week or every other week, because then we're able to have under the same roof for at least 3 or 4 hours the case manager, the circle keeper, the mental health specialist. And yes, we're requesting him to come to court, but not because we need to be, it's not the judge does not necessarily need to see him. It's just to make sure that there's some consistency and that we're able to walk with this participant as much as we can. And these are some of the really frustrating cases, because dealing with a young man that, in this case, that when we had the last polar vortex thing in January, he was cold, so he broke into a car because he needed to warm up. That was his logic, but he was breaking into a car, and was why he got arrested. The moment that he see him, he gets scared. Of course, he resists because that's how he functions. That's rough.
You know what we never mentioned is that I was thinking about asking participants to come to court every week. The court itself actually takes place and meets in North Lawndale. It's at UCAN. I don't know, does UCAN stand for something? But it's another social service agency in North Lawndale, and the court actually meets there. So when someone has to come to court that often, they're not being asked to go to 26 in California. It's still a court, but it's a little more inviting, and then some of the social services are provided on site, which makes it more convenient.
I have two questions. One is, you stated that the assistant state's attorney and the judge approved the agreement, and I just wondered, are there times that the judge or the state's attorney does not approve the agreement?
Yes, absolutely. A lot of times, it could be because the participant caught another case. Those things complicate our lives. That's why, whoa. So, hey, Stephanie, we're really getting close to this participant, but he got arrested this weekend and there could be something that your participant is in a really good place, and next thing you know, something happens. Could be even it literally happened to me last week. This participant lost his brother to violence on the street. So he went from being, yes, I'm trying to change my life, to screw it, I'm gonna go get somebody and I'm gonna go let them have the business, And I was like, ooh, that is completely destroyed. So when if you're ready to present that roja and the judge is reading that, your participant could say no. Or it could be that there are some things that the judge might say, I don't know, given what the participant saying, I don't know if this is going to be approved. And that's where also we have our last line of defense is the attorney there to say, hey, no, this is crazy. You also have to be very specific. When we do the repair of harm agreement, we're not going to say things such as, and these are the kind of rojas that the judge has not accepted. Hey, Huey is going to graduate from high school in August, because he's 18 years old and he needs an education. Well, guess what? Huey has only 3 credits. So that, no, this is not even realistic. A lot of that has been addressed by properly supporting some circle facilitators that might be experiencing in working with schools, but they have no experience working with these kind of cases that originate on the street.